So without any further ado, I want to introduce Jamie Nunez, and he is the Western Regional Manager at Common Sense Media and supports school districts, educators, and parents in their efforts to implement digital wellness initiatives. For over 18 years, Jamie has redefined education practices by exploring student online narratives in school environments. As a former high school teacher, school administrator, and after-school director, Jamie has trained thousands of educators and families on ways to weave student online identities into learning. And when not working, Jamie can be found on the beach teaching his 6-year-old daughter how to surf in the chilly Pacific Ocean. So I feel like we've found this gem and I'm so appreciative of you being here, Jamie. Your work and your training and everything that you do is so appreciated. And so we're so happy to have you here today, and I'll let you take it away, and I will be monitoring the chat to see if there's questions that come up, and we can tackle those as we go, and then some that seem to make sense to save later, we'll save later. So yay, go Jamie, I'll let you take it away.
You're the best, Beth. Thank you very much for your kind words. I appreciate your presence and always positive disposition. I see a number of you out there. Yolanda, see you. Happy Tuesday to you. Deborah, Allen, see you. Miss Moore, I see you. Thank you guys for being present. Miss Lou, pleasure to see you. I like your blue top. So thank you all for being alive this morning with me. And throughout the thing, I will likely call out everyone else that I see on screen. So I just want to let you know that I'm validating your presence. We are going to be spending the next probably about 90 minutes, maybe a little less time, really addressing the best ways to incorporate media balance for our littlest learners, right? Like for early child development. So if you're on the call this morning, either as a parent or as a provider, what I'm hoping to answer is, what do we do with all the screen time? How do we actually develop our kids during this time? Now, if you're on the call wondering, like, Jamie, I have an addiction with tech myself, and I need to use this space to talk about it, then by all means do that. But we really want to think about how to best support our families. And as Beth noted, I am the regional manager for Common Sense. We are the leading nonprofit dedicated to improving the lives of kids and families in this digital space. We have over 1 million users on our Common Sense Media site, where we rate and review books, videos, and apps. I work on behalf of the education platform that provides free lessons for educators. We'll be alluding to some of those lessons this morning on digital, what we refer to as digital citizenship or wellness, which is how to, and we'll talk about the definition in a second. And we also provide reviews of ed tech tools. So if you're wondering what the heck is Fortnite, or how do I actually use Instagram, or what are the best tools for my child to use or educators to use, I will allude to the best ways you can actually go into that and look at what we think about those tools. We provide unbiased reviews of them. We don't get paid for any of them. And then finally, we have a platform. Since last March, we worked with our partners to launch this site called Wide Open Schools, where we take the best resources from around Apple to Khan Academy to a number of resources from our partners, and we put them all together to provide free daily activities for families. So we'll all go through that. And again, this is all free. We're not selling anything. I wish I could sell you a t-shirt at the end, but I can't. So we are essentially providing that space. It's a pleasure to see you. Really, I really want to appreciate you. We're in a strange place, so I'm going to take a moment to kind of acknowledge your presence for just being alive. So thank you all for dressing up and looking great on screen. Susan Chan, Ron Pippa, Sonia, folks that I don't see on camera. I bet behind the screen you look great, and you don't want to intimidate us. So thank you very much for your humility. And I just really appreciate your presence here. What I'm going to ask you all to do is to think about who you are. Basically, I want you to introduce yourself. And then I want you to actually talk about a memorable media experience that you've had, either with your families, your own personal family, if you have one, and if not, with the families that you work with. What has been an actual memorable experience? It could be something silly as, hey, I watched a really good show that you should consider watching, to maybe you took Friday night to dance on a YouTube clip and you feel really good about it, right? I want you to say hello to someone, introduce yourself, and then also think about not the benefits, but a memorable experience that you had. So I'm gonna take a moment. Leah, if you can put folks in the breakout rooms. So here's how it would work. If I were in a breakout room with Shane, this is who I see. I would first compliment her glasses. Shane, I really like your glasses. Thank you very much. You look very comfortable in those glasses. And then I'd say, hello, I'm Jamie. And then I'd talk about my experiences. So feel free to do that. We'll come back after we acknowledge each other and say hello. But I just want to let you know, like, we're gonna get a chance to see each other. We're just giving you a little taste, okay? I just met Miss Allen, and I already want to be her good friend, so that's amazing. Um, Part of the reason we want to acknowledge each other is the very first step into understanding the world of our kids online. And one of what I mean by that is that our kids, when they're in front of their device, they are seen, they're connected with that particular space. It could be as silly as a child watching a YouTube clip and they're connected with a character. You know, once Dora says, now, what are you thinking about? That connection, that subtle pause is an actual affirmation of the child being connected, right? Or when the child is in front of a YouTube clip and they're watching something funny, they're engaging in that experience. So part of the challenge, part of the invitation that we have collectively is to think about how we can actually role model those experiences for our family. So if families are overwhelmed and they don't have time to do this, or if they rely on the phone because they're cooking dinner, we want to be able to replicate the sensation, the idea of actually being connected in that space. Because we're not replacing tech, we're figuring out how to live next to it so we can have the development that the child needs during that time. Does this make sense, everyone? If you have a different opinion, like absolutely tech is the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity, then I'm going to encourage you to kind of unmute yourself and think about what that is for you, because I don't want to challenge you. We're just going to figure out how to explore that so we can best support families. We're not here to judge our families. We're actually here to figure out what is the reality so we can work through that. Make sense? Hopefully you got a chance to validate each other before we connect on that. So part of what I want to do is to really think about what is actually happening at this state. And so here's what we're going to do together. Here's really our purpose, right? The first thing we're going to actually do is to think about how we can address media balance with our families by doing the following. The first is we want to figure out what exactly is a responsible use, right? How do we actually create responsible use of that device? And how do we remove our kids from thinking just about the time spent to what they've created online? So I might be looking at Megan right now, and Megan might be an amazing cook, right? And Megan is probably just watching a cooking show, but she's not actually cooking anything, right? So we want to try to get Megan from just being a passive viewer of cooking shows into actually working and creating cooking experiences while she's watching something, right? This isn't revolutionary. This is just the flip that we're trying to kind of create. So we're going to figure out how to do that. And then we want to talk about modeling, right? So as we work with families, what does it actually mean for moving away from actual digital balance strategy, moving away from letting the family know if something is good or bad, to what it means to balance out our experiences when we're on the device, right? The number one question families ask me across the country is, Jamie, how much time should my child that is blank blank age be on his or her own device? And I often respond with the following: it depends. Is your child simply sitting in front of the couch, or is your child simply engaging and creating art? And these are completely different experiences, right? So we're going to learn about what those tips are. And then finally, we're going to think about what it means to amplify our students and our kids' voice online. So you notice what I just did at the very beginning? I noticed Yolanda Romo, for example, or Miss Allen, or Miss Susan Chen. I noticed them because they were doing something really interesting, right? In the case of Yolanda, she had a really, really good concentrated face. I might say Ron Pippa, I really like the way he moves the experiences on his neck, right? So these are all really subtle examples of me saying, I see you online. That's what we're trying to build with our kids. Is this making sense, everyone, so far? Okay, if you want to give me the middle finger, or if you're like, get on with it already, I already get this, then bear in mind, we'll speed up a little bit. At any point, if you have any questions, I'm going to encourage you to unmute yourself or ask them on the chat. But by all means, feel free to open yourself up, okay? All right, here's what we're going to do. So here's the plan, and here's where I'm not a talking head. I'm going to be doing something, and then you're going to be responding into a plan, because That's the best way we learn. We're actually going to do something to build that. So you build your capacity in a really practical way. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about the trends that are actually happening. So you are aware of how to best speak to your families. You all are all very good at equipping and understanding how to speak with your families if you work directly with your families. But we're going to give you some tips on why it's important. So we'll give you some research first, right? And I'll summarize the research just so you know the high levels, but these are talking points for you to start to have conversations with your families about. The second thing is we're actually going to go in and talk about what are those strategies as it relates to digital balance. We're going to actively practice them so you yourself know what you can actually take with your toolbox to disseminate them to your families. And if you're on the call today and you say, well, Jamie, I don't work directly with families, I work with policy, then I'm going to give you some strategies so you can actually disseminate the rules of engagements related to that. And then finally, we're going to think about what does it actually mean to amplify those experiences of our kids online? What does it actually mean to make sure that our kids are validated? What does that look like? So we'll practice that and I'll give you some examples to close off with. All right. All right, everyone, this is great. So let's name the elephant. We're going to now go into breakout rooms and we're going to talk about it just because I want to talk about it so we get it out, right? And what you're going to do now is really going to talk about what are the primary challenges or the concerns you have as it relates to technology and young kids. What are the things that you're seeing, right? So I can name one. And then number one thing is our kids are very much overly exposed to technology, right? They're in front of their devices. Maybe some of them are in school doing Zoom calls. Maybe parents are overwhelmed, so they give them another show to watch on Disney Plus. Maybe you're like me with my 6-year-old that I just get tired on a Sunday and this is what I want. So what I want you to talk about is I want you to talk about what are the challenges that you're seeing with your community and what are the things that are coming up for you so we can name it and then get rid of it. Does this make sense? Okay, don't forget to acknowledge each other while you're in a breakout room. So Leah, if you don't mind breaking out groups in a room again, let's just do it this time with a group of 4 and we will go from there. Does anybody have any questions before I let you all go?
How long is this breakout room?
We'll do it for about 5 minutes, okay? And if you guys are like, Jamie, how dare you? This is too much talking about the problem. Don't worry, we're gonna get rid of it, okay? I see Cindy Martinez's face like uh-oh, but it's okay, you guys, just acknowledge it, okay? We'll see you guys shortly. How was it? You guys feeling good? I see that smile starting to come up just a little bit higher, like the coffee's kicking in now and we're feeling good. Even you, Margot Lee, I see the mask on that, but I see the smile behind that mask. So thank you for sharing that. And I found myself 3 sidekicks, assistants that I really want to highlight. So we might have to leave this training, or I might shut my mouth now as they go through it. But what came up? What were some of the themes that came up so we can kind of just get them out there to address them to then move forward with some solutions? What are the things you're like, Jamie, this is what's happening with me and our site? And I'll just go start with whoever blink first. So Delonda Charles, I kind of see you blinking a little bit. So if you do want to unmute yourself, I encourage you to highlight that. Oh, Miss Allen, I see your hand coming up as well. So let's either you or Miss Charles. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Can everyone hear me, I hope?
Mhm.
So basically, one thing that came up for us is we've noticed that the phone has been used as a babysitter. And the concern there being is that that connection is being lost, that how children learn because they really read us and they take their cues from us. So that was a concern for us.
Spot on. I want to echo that. Miss Denise in my group said something similar about the communication that's actually lost because of that. Spot on. That's a wonderful, wonderful highlight. I mean, pain point, I should say. Yeah. Miss Allen, do you want to unmute and go next? Is it okay?
Yes, I wanted to say that with my biggest concern with technology is that it produces a lack of empathy and a lack of human connections and a lack of concern for humans, which is critical to the human development. In order for us to survive as people, we don't want to develop more of technology, which to me, a robot, thinking, because a friend, a human being can be better than medicine. So we have to stay connected, be able to touch one another and feel one another and interact with one another.
Spot on. You're
Thank you.
absolutely right. Right. I
Yes.
wish I could take my hands and give you all a hug right now. I'm going to give you guys a virtual hug because I appreciate that. And I'll give you a hug in 2022, Miss Allen, because I love that comment. But I think what I really appreciated about both what you and Miss Yolanda said is that there is a connection that's being lost here, right? And that for our earliest learners, the art of empathy, the art of actually relating to somebody else's experience can be really difficult, right? And that we often in a society filled with a lot of noise, maybe some of you are like, okay, I've had enough, now let me check my email, that the art of noise, of distraction, is often preventing us from actually understanding our kids and for our kids understanding each other. So I really, really appreciate both those comments. You're absolutely right. Any other final things that came up for that folks want to raise to the group?
One thing that I find extremely interesting that came out is that children cannot separate reality from fantasy. And ages 2 to 3.5 years old. So we need more human connection.
Yeah, even the 40-year-olds can sometimes have a difficult time of separating reality from fantasy. I'll raise my hand nice and high on that one sometimes. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I'm sorry I cut you off, Matilda. Go ahead.
Yeah, for instance, I do bilingual reading online, and I find that the act for instance, in the library, they can touch each other and talk to each other. But in the classroom, it's difficult because they cannot be focused and listening to the person who is reading many times. So I have to really be extremely active in anagrama, and I find it very difficult to do it, but I do it and I love it. And it's great to be able to read in line.
I love it. And I love that you added that comment because, sometimes it feels like if we're educators, both to our families or even educators on the call, that we're actually entertaining more than we're actually teaching, right? That I constantly have to reinvent myself and refocus our kids. That's difficult, right? That's exhausting over time, both for kids to redirect and also for the presenter in this information. Miss Madeline, you had your hand up. Go ahead now.
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't get to share this, but I do have a background in environmental health. And so one of my concerns is how to safely use digital devices, knowing that Wi-Fi does have harm, especially for young children whose bones are not fully developed and solidified. So putting phones or anything, tablets near heads can be really dangerous.
The physical act, which is, thank you for sharing that because that is so spot on, right? That the fact that we're giving our kids these giant tablets or these Chromebooks without it. All right. Yeah, I can go on and on that whole section. Like, you know what? I might have a part 2 of that section just because there's like huge environmental implications related to that and the physio-socio connection that you've shared. Yeah, we need to connect because that's a really, really great alignment on that piece. All right, we're not going to get stuck here though, okay, you all? Because I kind of see some of you like starting to be like, God, the world is so gloom. Maybe I should really just go to Tahiti after all. Like, don't get stuck there, okay? I want us to name this piece because we're going to do something about it now. We're not going to solve everything. And I want us to name that that's a reality that we're grappling with, right? Whether the issues of connections or lack of empathy to environmental implications for our kids in their own development. Here's what I want us to take away from this piece. In a really practical sense, when you're working with families or your clients, or you're a parent yourself or you're an educator yourself, the number one thing I can start off with is I need you all to always validate the challenges that are associated with being on Tech for Families. Don't minimize it, don't gloss over it. Always name it for our families, those experiences. So if you have a phone right now, or if you have something to write with, the number one tip I'm going to encourage you to do is always think about how to name what's actually taking place, right? Because we don't have all the solutions for folks, but we can understand, as Miss Allen said, that we can actually name and validate those experiences for our families. We might not relate. We might feel inclined to have our biases kind of start to name themselves, or our judgments start to play in, but we want to suspend that to do something else. Does this make sense? Is everybody okay with it? All right. Thumbs down if you're like, I'm never going to do that, Jamie. Then it's okay. I'll still validate you in this experience. All right, so the next thing we're now going to do is, now that we've addressed it, let's look at some of the trends that we're seeing, um, to understand kind of how you can really talk about these things. So it's not just for us to name it and move on, it's actually to name it to validate that these concerns are not in silo. They're not just happening with one family, but we're seeing them as a result of things that we see online. And it's important to note this because it helps you to build your connections with the families that you work with. So at Common Sense, we do research, and the number one thing that we do is, one of the things that we do to build out our connections with these trainings is to think about what's actually happening. What are the trends happening across the country? So when I speak with educators, early childhood providers, I don't think about like my own personal experience. I think about the trends happening of the experiences that I see with our kids. So I'm going to give you kind of a high-end summary of what we've seen over our last research. Recently, at the tail end of last year, and folks that have access to this deck at the end of our session will kind of, you can click on the deck itself. We've done a research recently that looked at the role that YouTube and online experiences had with our child. What were our kids watching? Why were they watching it? What were the signs that were taken from watching those experiences, watching that? So we surveyed over, I don't know, something, or we analyzed the content of a little under 1,800 kids, about 1,600 kids, and we asked them to look at a specific YouTube site, not YouTube Kids, not anything else. We just asked them to look at the YouTube site. And then we looked at and we coded how they were viewing that information, and the information that we found based on how they were watching videos, based on what we saw on viewing hundreds of videos that our kids were actually watching. And here's what we found, right? I'm going to give you kind of the high end just so you are aware of what you're seeing. And you're probably thinking, I see this all the time, Jamie. So pat yourself on the back for being a good qualitative researcher if you've seen this. The first thing that we've seen is that 95%, that advertising is happening in 95% of the videos that our kids are watching. Give you a quick example on the slide. If you notice that an actual ad here, Simon's Rock, is overseeing the content on this particular banner, right? This happens to us sometimes when we see this. This happens for our kids. Well, that's not so important, right? But what we see is that almost half of the videos is actually asking our kids to buy something, a little under 45%, right? So the call to action for our videos is about consumption. And for many of our kids, if you see them wanting more toys or wanting more, there's a coincidence. There's not a coincidence here. This is actually by design, by intention. Here's where it gets a little funny, and I promise I'm going to go a little bit dark or a little real to you to bring us back up, but just so you are aware, right? What we know is that a quarter of the videos that our kids are seeing, our young kids, 0 to 8 years old, are seeing, are actually intended for an older audience. And so, there was a number of you on the call that mentioned that developmentally these things are not appropriate. Right, so we see this firsthand. This is an interesting video that happened, I guess, late March. It was happening more consistently, but it was geared towards 8-year-olds or 6-year-olds. This is a UFC fighter and another a video clip spliced together to create the illusion that this was something kind of not condescending, but something sensual in nature. But what this actually was is two videos put together to think that you're watching something that was much more sensual than it actually was. And this happens a lot with our kids watching two different video clips, thinking that it's actually one clip, which in fact it's really not. So think about that, right? And the next piece is that our kids, whereas in years past, the use of videos now is actually for entertainment rather than educational purposes. And we're seeing a big trend in this actually taking place, that when you see a child in front of YouTube, or when you see a child in front of, well, not so much PBS, but there's a certain video component, and we can kind of get into the tech apps in a second. But notice that it's actually shifted, right? So notice if you grew up watching Sesame Street, that has sort of shifted into things like unpacking games or unpacking toys. So those are the other big trends that we're seeing. And finally, I think one of the things, and this is what's concerned, this is where I think if we start to put rules in place for our families, to be aware that in 3 of the 10 videos, or roughly about 30%, that there is some type of mild violence taking place. Now we can go on and we can go back and forth as to see whether or not video games are good for our kids or not, but that's not the conversation we're having. What's important to note is that developmentally, our kids are not ready to experience that type of physical connection and altercation, right? So just know that these are the trends that are actually happening. What I would encourage you to think about, though, and I kind of close with this, which is the diversity in our representation of our role models. We're actually only seeing that in about 0.25% of the videos. That it's important to note that if you work with diverse families or any families, that it's important to note and name call that when something is not authentic, that these are often challenging. When my child cannot see who she is represented by, it can become really difficult for her to resonate with those characters online or in video. That's what there's an assumption being made on that. So if you're drinking some water, I encourage you to take it now. If you're drinking beer this early, then I encourage you to sip it now if that's your call. But what I want you to take away from our research is twofold. Look back and think about where those pain points that you talked about with the group, and think back about what research actually affirms those beliefs that you have. It may be something that we have at Common Sense, or maybe something that you've done at your particular site. But when you validate the experiences of our families, make sure that those validations come with actually what's communicating about trends that they're seeing, so that you don't feel like they're actually in silo. Is this making sense, everyone? This is kind of what we're trying to attempt to do here, okay? All right, enough of that. Everybody get a chance to take a break. Let's do me a favor, because we've been on this call for about 38 minutes. It's helpful to take a break from this. So do me a favor, walk away from the screen, drink some water, blink for about 20 times, and then we'll come back in about, let's say about 3 minutes from now, just so we feel energized for the next part. Feel free to stop your video if you like, and we will come back in 3 minutes. All right, welcome back, welcome back. Margot Lee, let me just acknowledge your map behind you. It looks very, very cool. So you have to, at some point on the chat, tell me where you got your really cool design. Oh, that is so cool. That is amazing.
It's actually a wall decal.
It is. Wow. That is neat. You got to let me know. I got to find that because that's really, really cool. I love that. Crystal McHugh, I love whoever the person is on your picture. I love the Hawaiian flower design behind your setting. So you got to at some point show me where that person got that image. It's very nice. And Miss Sybil Moore, I like your pink top with your curtains. It kind of gives a good dimension you got going on there. Yeah. And I like the little backdrop. Sorry to be so invasive in your home, but I like where it says, it appears to be teach on that. Finally, Bradley Wolf, I should have noticed. I never can grow a beard, but I like yours. You have a really nicely shaped beard, so keep it up. Huh?
Try my best. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, you all ready? I think we're in summertime mode, so we're gonna actually do something about this now, right? So the idea here is we are going to acknowledge what we can actually do about these experiences. So like, thanks, Jamie, you got me wild up. What can we actually do about it? So give me 1 second as I share my screen again, and we will start. So the next thing we were going to do is to think about what exactly can we do? What is the process that we can to sort of help to support our families, right? We kind of see these trends. What can we actually do to kind of address them? And here's where I'm going to encourage you all to think about the techniques and the strategies that you all use. I'm going to encourage you all to either unmute or either share them on the chat about the things that you do to raise awareness. Like, for example, I was on a call at the very beginning of our time with Miss Allen, and she says, you know what I did, Jamie? I actually will write something when my families, or that when they receive their packages, they actually have a video recording of themselves opening it. And it brings me a lot of joy, right? And I'm like, ooh, that is good, right? So the idea of using tech to validate that you actually even got the mailing or the support, right? So, if you have any small tips like this, I'm going to encourage you to kind of share them throughout this second part of this. Sound okay? Don't be shy. Don't say, oh, this isn't good, or, the fact that I give pencils out is not good for me. Like, we want to be as open as we can. All right, so here's what we're going to do now, right? And here's where we're going to start writing some things down, but I'll let you know what these are. The digital balance strategies are threefold in this case. I'm going to give you the tips of what it actually means to help our families with balance. The first is we want to shift our thinking into thinking that we're experts to becoming actual mentors in their relationship with technology. So the first ask is to become a media mentor. You might be thinking, what the heck is that term? We'll explain it in a second. The second is I want us to encourage and to empower our families and to validate our families when they become media mentors, meaning when they're supporting their kids in the development of the type of technology that works for their consumption, that connection. And then the final thing is I want us to be able to invite our families, create a system, create a plan in our groups, in our sites, to use tech intentionally to cultivate the executive functioning skills with our kids. So let me repeat that really quickly. Number one is we ourselves today will becoming mentors, meaning we are shifting our thinking about how we're going to address balance with our families. Then once we feel comfortable, we're going to empower our families to do the same thing. And then finally, when we feel that our families are actually getting it down or they already got it down, we're going to actually shift the conversation just a little bit to have them actually work with technology that actually helps to develop their own growth. All right, what does this all actually mean? And so part of what when we talk about being a mentor is this. The first is we want to be a role model to our kids in how we ourselves are using the device, right? So if I'm on a call, if I am constantly using my phone and my 6-year-old comes in and she calls me out, I'm not gonna defend myself or get defensive. I'm simply going to shift my thinking about how I explain my use of technology. You see with a difference in that there? We're not about, well, I'm an adult and you're a kid. Now you need to do what mom or your dad says. Like, that's not what we're going to try to think about, because we want to think about usage here, right? We want to think about how to experience the tech with our kids. So you might be thinking, you know what, Jamie, you are so full of it. Bullet point number 2, it does not work for me. My parents work. There's no way in hell I'm going to sit down for 11 minutes as I watch this show. That's not at all what we're talking about here. Experiencing technology is about connecting with our kids about the content that they are watching. So let me give you a quick narrative to explain this part before we get into the details. When I was a kid, my mom would often say, turn on the television, and she'd watch a telenovela with me, which is this crazy drama, like 15 people dying and 15 people getting pregnant at the same time. My mom would never, ever be in front of that show with me. She would never do that. But you know what she would do is every 30 seconds, she'd interrupt me to say, what's happening now? What's happening now? And then I'd have to curate those experiences. So I became the narrator, right? So all of a sudden, my mom was part of the show because we were having a conversation as there's a fighting going on and, somebody kissing each other and then somebody being shot at the same time. Like, my mom wanted that same experience, even though that she wasn't with me. So that is about experiencing technology with your child, right? And again, I'm not suggesting that you have your parents watch telenovela like my parents exposed me to at an early age, but this is part of the connection. So that is the experience with, instead of passively having them view it. The third thing is actually thinking about delayed gratification. So if we want to develop this idea that now is not what you want, but now is when the time is needed for you to have technology. That is part of being a mentor, right? I was speaking with Beth at the very beginning, and she told this great story of her kids eating vegetables, and that there was never any snacks in the house before dinner. You were never allowed to watch. You're never allowed to eat snacks as you're watching tech, but you could eat vegetables, right? And Beth did a great job of actually delaying that connection of consuming vegetables. In many ways, this is the exact same thing. Beth, by the way, I want to take that and apply it to my own family. So thank you. But this idea that we want to teach our kids how to delay the experiences of being in front of a device, right? And then finally is be able to still regulate and to monitor our kids based on the rules that we establish, right? So teaching our families that rules are actually a good thing, but recognizing that they're feelings that could actually come up. Right. So if I'm looking at Shane right now and Shane all of a sudden is yelling at me and she's unmuting herself and she's yelling at me because she wants to play a video at this point, then I'm going to tell Shane, you know what, Shane, I acknowledge the fact that that's not what you like. And that's not something that you want. But rules are the rules. And this is what's actually going to take place. Right. So being clear that those expectations don't actually go away. You guys with me? That's the concept of being a mentor here. All right. And then finally, as we get into what does it actually mean to really exhibit and to select high quality content, right? That it's not simply saying, you know what, you got 10 minutes, and then at 10 minutes, I need you to turn the device off. But it's saying, you know, when you watch that show, what is the one thing you're going to learn? Can you explain it to me? And then at the very end, what are we going to do about it? Right, so that might be something that we're applying into our content. So it's twofold here. Number one is we're selecting the type of content that works for us. You might be thinking, how do I do that? But I'm going to give you the Pandora's box in a second. And then the executive functioning skills is all about what you want them to be doing with it. All right, I just talked at you, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second, acknowledge where you guys at, and then see if there's any questions related to this core concept. These are key in the development, so we'll go through each of them in parts now, but just in general, does anybody have sort of questions on this? All right.
You can feel free to unmute yourself, or you can add something in the chat if you want, if you have a question.
Actually, I had a question.
Yeah.
If you have a client that's really interested in a YouTube channel that tends to kind of intersperse not developmentally appropriate content, but they're very kind of fixated on that, how would you recommend helping the parent understand and contextualize that and maybe redirect?
I would do I'd do three things. Well, let's just start with the two of the three. The first thing is I'd validate that there's a connection that the family has with the child. Hey, I'm really fascinated in the fact that you like dogs jumping from roofs. Wow, that's fascinating that you're watching that, right? So being able to name the fact that there's a connection that's being drawn from the technology. Two is I would think about the before, the during, and after of the content. So if high quality content needs to be substituted because there's a connection, it's about what are we going to do when we watch this? What are we going to do when you're watching this? This is what I need you to do. Meaning, like, if you're watching a dog jump off of a roof, and I don't personally like it, but when you watch it, I want to ask you to think about how that dog might feel, right? So write something down, draw something, and then afterwards, we want to do something with it, right? So we're transitioning from that. So those are the kind of really the subtle things that I would do on that. And then the third, obviously, being when the child has done that and the family recognize that they're doing that, to amplify it, blow it up, post it on grandma's like message, like being able to connect with it. Does that make sense? Great question, Bradley. Really, really good question. And then over time, the conversation of that particular client is about, does what they're watching lead to what you want them to be doing in terms of learning, right? It's the subtle passive observation that you see. Well, you know what, Mr. Wolf, I actually didn't like that. In fact, my child gets a little intense at the very end. They want to do more and more on YouTube. Well, that is actually the sentence starter. That's the seed that you planted to have that conversation, right? So does that make sense? Yeah, really great question. Any other questions?
So, the parents are the role models for their children's use of technology. And I'm wondering, certainly we have to start with educating the parents about this subject, but getting them over their own use of the technology so they can transfer, that to their child, what we're just talking about.
Yeah. Absolutely, Ron. I think you're absolutely. I love the comment, and I think absolutely right. I think for many of our families, they, again, I'm raising my hand nice and high because I often go down the rabbit hole of YouTube, or will watch something, and 2 hours later, all of a sudden, I'm watching, how to grow little plants or something in my backyard, right? So we have to acknowledge when the technology is doing that to us, right? That by design we're confronted against it at platforms, or platforms that want us to be in front of our device. And for many of our families, they just need an outlet, right? So being able to not be okay with that, but being able to know that when we can actually shift that conversation into thinking that. I'm going to give you a tip at the tail end about how to do that, how to prevent that. To do that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to give you a tip now if you guys are okay with that, because I think I'll forget it. A really good way to prevent privacy, particularly around YouTube. Again, I'm just picking on YouTube because it's really easy to look at. I'm going to share my. Give me 1 second, everyone. I'm just going to pull this up for us. So if you are struggling, if you see this, Ron, to Ron's point, which is really great, if you're struggling with just like trying to figure out how to like end the loop, one of the things that you can do and encourage your families to do is when you're on YouTube, go to this section here. If you just go to youtube.com and you look at anything, you go to your profile settings. There's a little picture of yourself. You can encourage families to do that. And then you're going to click on at the very bottom where it says settings. So you want to click on that. And then when you click on that, what you're going to do is you're going to click on something called privacy. So one more time, you're going to click on the circle. You're going to click on the term that says settings. And then you're going to click on, which will bring this sort of field up. You're going to click on this thing called privacy. And when you see privacy, one of the things that you can do to kind of stop that loop, stop that kind of like ongoing conversation, is limiting your playlist. So here's what you can actually do. The first thing is you want to keep your subscriptions private. So this is actually active. This is actually passive, meaning it doesn't work. And you want to keep all your saved playlists private. What that does is two things. And one more time, you're going to privacy, and then you're making sure that these two things are gray. What that does is it actually prevents, the platform will then prevent you from actually showing you things that are similar to what your playlists are. So again, if you're Miss Moore and you like really nice drapes and you like really nice clothes that she has, and she watches YouTube clips of those two things, then that is what prevents the algorithm, the YouTube clip, from actually showing you more and more of that. Does this make sense? So Ron, really great comment and really great way to help families with that. And again, happy to show you more tips like this if you'd like, but these are really subtle things that you can showcase to your newsletter, or really subtle tips that you have. All right, any other questions before we move on? I want to be mindful of time, that we have about some time left. All right, at any point, if there's any questions or anything that you're grappling with, please feel free to unmute yourself or add it on the chat. All right, so what do we actually, let me go back to the experience here. So we've talked about being a media mentor, right? So what do you need for that? This is kind of what you need. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a number of tools that can help you for it. Again, I'm going to share the deck with you so you yourself can actually look at all the tools themselves in a second to explore what you can do as a piece that works best for your agency or you as your clients. But the key in all this is to understand that digital wellness or citizenship is foundational to media mentorship, to being a mentor. And what it means is this is what we're trying to do. That we want to tend to ensure that our kids are thinking critically, meaning they know that they're thinking about something before they show up. We know that we want them to behave safely. And then the third is we want them to participate responsibly. So if you took nothing else from this training so far, this would be the key. Hey, listen, you know what, Ms. Cuenca? Are your kids thinking critically right now? Or Ms. Denise, right now, are your kids behaving safely, right? These are the three things we want to kind of get to. This is important to it, right? So if you think of your campaign, if you think of what you're trying to do with your clients, these are really great foundational things that you can look at. And then the executive functioning skills that I mentioned before is really this. Can you put all those things together and help them to achieve the goals that you needed to, right? Can I put the fact that I'm thinking safely, I'm looking at good quality content, and now I'm actually doing something with it? That's really the idea behind executive functioning skills, right? And so let me kind of give you kind of what that looks like. So we have two things going on, right? And I went fairly fast with this, but I'm gonna give you some time to think about this. You had the fact that you want to be a mentor, right? And these are the things you got to do. And then this is why you have to do it. That's the digital wellness, behaving safely, participating responsibly, and thinking critically. And then you're going to put this all together into when that child is watching that device. And so here's what you're trying to focus in on, right? So, Miss Denise, I see that you're focusing right now when you're watching that YouTube clip. You know why I see that you're focusing? Because you seem to be writing some notes down. And you see the connection that we're having here? All of a sudden, Miss Denise and I are having a connection based on what I perceive that she's doing, right? So, Miss Sybil, for example, Miss Moore, I see you moving your eyes one way or another. It looks like you got self-control right now because you're just paying attention to this right now, right? Or, you know what, Miss Matilda, as you're reading your books to your kids, you might be thinking, hey, I really like how you are all thinking very differently. You're thinking about this tiger and you're thinking about this book that I'm reading. Good job. Way to think flexibly. So do you see what we're doing here? It's not just about paying attention in front of the device now. It's about ensuring that you're doing something specifically along the way. Okay, I just vomited a bunch of things at you, everyone. I want to be cognizant as a trainer. Is this making sense? Like, are we kind of okay with that? We're doing some parts together. Any questions? Anything that, like, I don't know what you just said. Start from the beginning, Jamie, or I've hated your tone so far. Change, make your tone higher. All right, it's important to know the foundation though, right? So we're not talking about time. We're not talking about high quality content yet. We're talking about, are you safe? Are you responsible? And are you participating are you thinking critically? Then we're talking about, so once you're on that device, are you doing something that you can achieve your goals? Are you thinking about your memories? Are you thinking flexibly? Are you thinking about self-control? Whatever the executive functioning skills that you're trying to share with families, those are the two things that are actually going on together. Okay, cool. All right, questions.
Yeah.
Bradley, yes.
Quick question. In terms of supporting caregiver systems that might be kind of within multi-stress family systems. So like on paper, it'd be great to for them to have a lot of time to dedicate towards like understanding the content, the media. But in reality, there are a lot of pressures on the family system, and there's not necessarily a tech nativeness for a lot of caregivers, first time, kind of using technology. So what kinds of supports would you recommend clinicians, give to the caregivers that have limited bandwidth, limited time resources?
Really great question. I mean, you guys are good today. I love it. Great questions on that piece. The first thing I would do is I would think about a number of campaigns, a number of things that you can do really small, right? So join us this entire week as we share 5-minute tips that you can do with your families to feel connected, right? So you're acknowledging that there's not a lot of time. You're acknowledging that you're going to be giving them really subtle things. And you're acknowledging that when they do that, they can move on to the next thing, right? So maybe it's what you write down, your newsletter that comes out, and then the top, it's like top best ways to work with tech today, right? And that could be something really simple. Hey, here's how to practice turning your device off at night. Make it really, really basic and subtle. So you are acknowledging the process along the ways. And if you want some tips, I will leave my email address and give you hundreds of examples and even work directly, as I mentioned, with your agency to create these campaigns. Again, this is all free, but if you needed that support, I'm happy to work through the county, First Five, to help you with these campaigns. but to that point is make it short, make it very sweet, and make it affirming. That would be that. When they are ready, when you want to do more theoretical stuff, not that we want to say, okay, here's executive functioning skills. That's not what we're trying to do with our families. We're simply going to say, here's top 3 ways that you can build memory when watching YouTube, right? You want to get that sort of subtle catches with your families. Or you might say, maybe you work with Spanish-speaking families, you might say, cosas que pueden hacer cuando tu hijo está aburrido. You know, top things you can do when your child says that they're bored online, right? And so you're just building a narrative, knowing because you've already seen the pain points that you're struggling with our families from. Sorry, I'm so long-winded, Bradley. I'm just so passionate about this. Is this helpful? Yeah. Okay. Any other tips on that? And again, I'm happy to give you guys newsletter tips or, you know, heck, I'm even happy to write your newsletter for you if you need it. I'm get excited about these things, but I'm happy to be a part of that experience. Great question though.
You make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Does it help? Yeah.
Very
Okay.
helpful, extremely helpful.
All right. So we're going to now practice this. Okay. So this is what I'm going to give you at this point. I'm going to give you the deck itself, so you can look at some of the ways that you can build your capacity for this. So Bradley, really great segue into what I'm going to give you now. This is all free here. This is not intended for anything. I'm going to add the deck to the chat now. What I will be doing is use it, take all of it, take whatever you want, but the next slides are about, well, how can I do this? Right? So we're going to practice that now. And so you guys can take any of these. Some of them might not work for you. All of them might work. None of them might work, but these are ideas that you can have to create that. You guys okay with that? Yeah. So let me present the next sort of step on this now. So you want to experience sort of this with your child, right? We've kind of talked about this. How do you then develop this with families? So the people that are part of the child's life, we all know that they're key in all of this. So just name, when you work with your clients or with your families, always have them say, who's going to be the person in charge that's going to be controlling the media consumption in this household? Is it grandma? Is it aunt? Is it cousin? We want to name who the key stakeholders are in this people. Always try to work with your families to name who those folks are, right? Sometimes you'll have someone that's like, well, mom's really good, but dad, forget about dad. He's like always on his device, right? We're not trying to make a divisive family dynamic here. We're just naming who has the greatest strength in what, right? And then the second thing is thinking about, as I mentioned, co-viewing. You know, if I'm with Ron, for example, and we're watching a really interesting documentary, I might just watch Ron, the way Ron starts the first 2 minutes, and then I might move on, right? But it's knowing and letting the child know that you see them, right? It's their present. And then finally, it's about asking those engaging questions. Remember the comadre kind of conversation about watching the telenovela example that I gave you guys? You can shout, you can train that, you can teach your families to do that and practice it with that, right? These are the interesting examples. I want to recognize and name my bias here. It's difficult. We're busy. Families are exhausted. Families overwhelmed. Let's not like beat around the bush here. This is a real authentic challenge that our families are grappling with. These are the ideal sense, but these are something that we are striving for. Is this making sense? All right. So let's think about how to then do that here, right? Here's some examples of questions, right? I sort of randomly picked, I can give you 100. Hey, why did you decide to actually play that game online? Why did you decide to watch that video? I'm really curious. What was that book that you're reading again? Tell me about it, right? Tell me about your feelings so far in that story. Does that bother you? Hey, we're gonna pause really quick this YouTube video about this cat jumping in pudding, and tell me what you like about pudding. It doesn't matter what it is. We are just encouraging our families to ask questions, right? Or it could be something as simple as like, tell me what you learned today that you didn't know yesterday from that game, that video app. It can be building upon that section. I'll give you a quick case study, right? There's a families that there's a platform or a video game called Fortnite. If you know it, interesting. If you don't, it's about kids playing this game where they work together in groups to fight off other people. And I worked with this family. I said, so interesting, you mentioned at the very beginning that you your 7-year-old is now playing Fortnite, which is intended for 13 plus. I'm really curious what you do with it. And she says, you know what, Jamie? I know what you're thinking, and it's not what you think. In our household, what I do is I have my child play Fortnite, and then when we're all playing together in the backyard, we're playing Fortnite too. But you know what our Fortnite looks like? Our Fortnite is about helping people instead of actually killing people. So every time I ask my child when he plays Fortnite, I ask him to think about the new weapons or the new ways in which he killed people so we can do the opposite when we're playing. And notice the funny thing that just happened here, right? Like that my bias about video game playing is actually an opportunity for families to have together, a time together, right? Or I had another family, a Spanish-speaking family, whose child actually noted that his mom was taking too many selfie pictures. And she said, this is a quite humorous story. I'm going to share it in Spanish because I want to respect the language. She says, no te cansas? And the mom said, what? No te cansas? Like, aren't you tired? And the mom said, tired? Tired of what? And the child says, de tomándote tantos selfies, that you're taking so many selfies. Don't you ever get tired of that? And the mom was like, whoa, wait a minute. And so for the mom to tell that story, she had to recognize that she was role modeling something that was not a good behavior with a kid, right? So again, these are all humorous stories, but we got to pull them out because our kids are trying to tell us something. And then the last narrative that I'll share with you is, I don't know if you guys have noticed, and I'll get a little closer to the camera in a second, but I've been on Zoom calls a lot. I train for a living. And so my daughter walked in, she's 6 years old, and she's doing her Zoom calls. And she says to me, that's it, Papa. And we mix and match Spanish in our household. She says, that's it. From now on, you only get 3 Zoom calls a day. And I'm like, what? And I got 5 today alone. And she's like, you know why? And I said, no, sweetheart, like, why are you telling me? She's like, your eye looks like a robot, right? And I looked in my eye and my eye was bloodshot. And how my child knows these physical changes taking place as a result of me being online is something I have to be mindful of, right? So now my calls are from 10 a day to maybe 6 a day, but at least I'm telling her along the way. So these are the conversations, these are the questions that we're trying to build up. You guys okay with that? Sorry to kind of digress, but this is kind of a connection here. And then on the off chance you want to take care of a 6-year-old that can tell you what to do, then please write your address and I'll send my little 6-year-old for the next few hours. All right, let's close off with our experience. So what are these tools? And let me give you kind of an example here. So the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is a campaign around delayed gratification and about teaching your kids how to pause before looking at that. Delayed is often associated with time, but it also could be a process, right? So let me give you a quick video to kind of exemplify this, just so you are aware of what this looked like. Again, this is a free video on behalf of Common Sense. You could showcase this. We have it in Spanish. We might even have it in another language. This might be something easily that you just share with families, right?
Technology is so cool. I love playing games, watching funny videos, and learning new things. Sometimes it's hard for me to say goodbye to my device, especially when I'm having so much fun. But I followed 3 simple steps. Pause, breathe, finish up.
Now you try.
Pause, breathe, finish up.
Let's try that again, but this time a little faster.
Pause, breathe, finish up.
So I can go on and on, but these are really subtle things that you can teach, right? You might be saying, my families aren't going to buy that. That is the cheesiest video I've ever seen in my life, right? But you can take the lessons from that and actually build it in for your little ones, right? And I personally obviously like these little characters that resonate with some certain kids, but these are things, this is one tip that you can do, right? Pick a statement, pick a campaign, pick something that you want to say, and then have them repeat it over, right? That's number one. And I've given you a number of lessons here from this. Again, you can take if you'd like to read through it. These are a number of resources that reinforce that. The setting of the rules. We have a great media agreement that you can share with families if that's what you want. There's a great lesson on saying goodbye to technology for our little ones. So I encourage you, there's a pledge if you want to do this on behalf of your provider. This might be interesting where you can kind of start off. We're going to do 5 days with no tech from 9 to 10 at night. Something really simple like that. Again, the next thing is about monitoring behavior. Again, I'm giving you sort of activities that families can do. This is a K through second activity guide. So maybe you're just struggling, right? Like, I don't know what activities my families can do. You can look at this sheet about how to embed media balance for our families. There's a bunch of languages that we've allocated here. If you click on this, we have things like Korean to Arabic to Tagalog. So these are also tips that you can take. Again, these are just one pagers that can showcase for you. Maybe you send this out as a template, or maybe you provide, you pull from that to create your own sort of campaign. There's an infographic if you want to do something on behalf of your own staff, if you work directly with parents about decisions that kids make when they're on YouTube, how to set them up. So these are kind of, again, if you're trying to kind of address things like irritability or sleep deprivation, these are things that you can recognize on that piece. And then I think there's a few other ones. We have a tech balance campaign. Again, these are completely free. If you click on this site here, you can actually receive text messages from Common Sense. You can have this as a campaign to your family, so they just have to text the word kids to 21555. This is all free. Again, we're nonprofit. We're not selling anything. So maybe you are interested in having your family for a few weeks subscribe to really basic tips, right? We have some really basic things about what tips that they can give them. Maybe you want to do that, or maybe you yourself subscribe and you pull from that and then you share it with your families. This might be something really helpful. So, and again, we do this about once every week, sometimes once every other week, but we try to reduce our cadence so we're not bothering families, but we're providing them actual tips. So again, these things are free. That we're not selling anything. We're not selling your data. That's we are very concerned about that stuff. Again, if you are interested in more flyers, you can receive these informations from us. But what I would take away from this slide is that you can easily do this yourself and put it in your name, right? If you need some tips on how to create free text message campaigns, please reach out to me afterwards and I can help you out with that. And then finally, we have a content, as I mentioned at the very beginning, free lessons. And what we do at Common Sense is we take these topics, instead of addressing media balance and well-being, we have our kids and we provide free lessons for providers about finding balance in their digital life. So videos that you've seen, you can take on, and we offer free lessons for you. So this might be something that you share with your families, not for them to do, but maybe something that you all do collectively at your next session. So, all right. And then, these are the times that we explore. So I'm going to share my sort of screen on that piece. What I'm going to do now is we have about 15 more minutes, maybe 20 more minutes. I want us to get into breakout rooms one last time. And what I want us to do is I want you as the provider, or as the folks on the call, I want you to share your tips, right? So you can take what we've gotten at Common Sense and in the sessions, but I want you to share the tidbits that you do. It could be something really simple, like I smile before I'm on a Zoom call, to research that you've done that you want to highlight. And I want you to share those tips collectively with each other, and then we'll come back together to kind of showcase what came out. That sound okay? All right, we're almost there, everyone. I don't want to talk your hair off, but so we're going to close off, and then we'll come back to close our session. All right, it's 11:27. I always see that exhausted look after about 87 minutes and being in front of a screen. So let me ask a process question for everyone. Can we go 10 more minutes to kind of close off our time, or that's option number one. And option number two is like, I don't want to hear your voice anymore. Like, let's just close it in the first 5 minutes. So if you can put your hands up, well, let's see. Let's make it anonymous. Is it okay if we do 10 more minutes, you guys? I promise the last piece is okay. Okay.
Sure.
All right. And you guys are okay with each other? You got each other's like tips from one another?
Oh, yes.
Okay, if you like really like the person and you're like kind of embarrassed, I'm gonna like bring us back into middle school. Like I really wanted to ask this person something, but I didn't know how to get in touch with them. I'm gonna give you that liberty to on the chat, be intentional. Say, hey, Miss so and so or Mr. So and so, I really like that tip. Can I get your contact information so I can actually get from that, right? So part of us is actually we're agents of change, so we share our resources with one another. Miss Margot, I gave you my email address, so feel free to do that. And I'm going to model that for us really quickly and let you all know that if you were like, Jamie, I need you to help me with this, please use that email and let me be your thinking partner. Let me be your advocate on your end. Don't hesitate. I'm happy to do that on behalf of First Five and on behalf of just Common Sense Media. So, okay, I got about 9.5 more minutes. So let me close our session up and then let you kind of know why this is kind of important. We're going to gloss through some of these slides, but I'm going to encourage you to kind of look at the pieces that I share with intention, right? So we mentioned at the very beginning about high quality content. And I want to show you kind of a really quick way of doing that, right? Looking at examples of what works and what doesn't. So on the left-hand side is maybe something that your kids might see or your families might see. Sometimes Daniel Tiger is a very popular thing, right? Right. So we have really quickly, we have Daniel Tiger, others that have pauses in between. One of the really great ways of seeing content very effective is to the extent in which you allow dialogue to take place, right? On the right-hand side, what you'll see is Boba's experiences, right?
The ads at the bottom.
Right away, what that tells me is a few things. There's ads at the bottom. This might be something our kids are seeing on Prime or Netflix or YouTube, but right away I see a few things happening. Number one is the exposure to amount of content, like too many things happening at one time, right? Our kids are having to process him flipping, then having to squeeze his nose. We want to be able to name it, see the subtleties here, right? Slow isn't always better, but actually being able to process and break in between content is what's actually important. That's what we're looking for, right? Also, somebody pointed it out. You learned, kudos to you. You saw that there's ads at the bottom. As we think about it, these are the things that we're looking for with our families. I'm happy to kind of show you high quality and content that doesn't work if you'd like more information around this. But just know the difference here is pausing and process versus overstimulation of visuals, right? Notice that if there's like one thing happening over another, typically the resonance is anything from like 2 to 3 second shifts, meaning if I see too many images playing out too quickly, it's very difficult for our little ones to actually look at and process that information. So just being mindful of that. All right. No more, Boba. I can't take you anymore. We offer at Common Sense this review here. So if you're like, I don't even know where to start, you can do is we have this thing called Common Sense Selections. These are learnings. I'm going to show you what they look like in a second. But again, we offer this unbiased kind of review of apps. You can look at a number of things here, right? So I'm going to show you kind of what it looks like here. On the left-hand side is apps that you would see on our site. This is called Storyboard, for example. This is storytelling to help kids publish stories. These are intended primarily for little ones. What I would do is I would consider like looking at these types of experiences, and I would look at whether or not it validates it, like if it's free, there's pricing along with it, and then I'd read the review. If it works for your families, you can do that. But if you don't want to do that, just look for this little Common Sense Selection seal. And that gives us, based on the research that we've done on that particular app, the OK stamp, like you're the top of the thousands that are out there related to this. So as you go into our site, you will notice ways in which you can look at applications more critically on that. And that's kind of what I'll share on that. And I can kind of show you the site for those of you that want to stay on. I want to close with this though, and I'm going to close with maybe a potential way that you can look at challenging your connections with your families, like making sure that your kids are always at the forefront. And the most ideal sense, we think that there's a one-to-one connection, right? So if I'm with Miss Allen here and I give her the device, there's an assumption that we have a relationship. I don't want to be the first to tell you, but the reality is that our kids are overly stimulated and overly bombarded with different variables or different stimuli coming on, right? So here's an opportunity that I'm going to close with. What would it look like if today, after this call, you picked up the phone and you shared with your clients, or maybe you run a center, you run something, to actually pick up the phone to say, you know what, well, let's create a different opportunity for our kids and the time that they spend online. And let's do the following. Let's think about the time being one, because we can't get out of the fact that our kids are spending too much time on the device. But let's think about other ideas where they can showcase who they are and use tools to showcase who they are, right? I'm going to give you the story because this is a really easy way to do that. The first thing you can do is name the elephant. How much time is good time for your kids and your families? I can't tell whether Yolanda's spending too much time or Ron is spending less time, right? I can't tell if Miss Denise is spending time because she's overly stimulated, or Miss Margot is spending time because she's got to work in it, right? That she's on a Zoom call. So name it for your families, right? If you see that your child is blank, meaning that there's no connection, then maybe we want to increase not the time, but the exposure to the things that are beneficial online. Maybe your kids are seeing drawing connections, right? That you're seeing something like when they're watching something, they're playing it out, like the Fortnite story that I shared. Continue to play that out, right? Or maybe it's the opposite end, right? Maybe you're like Miss Denise or Miss Cuenca that's like, give me more, I can't give more. And they start yelling at you and they're out of control. Then we need to scale back our time, right? So it's about a variant here. This is about a spectrum that we're looking at. There is not a one-all that can help to kind of answer this. Once you've identified that, though, know the tools that work for them, right? And I'm going to tell you how this plays out, right? You can go to our site, you can look at that, and you can look at, based on what works here, you can look at the tools that can actually help to reinforce what you want them to actually be learning. I'm going to give you the example now, okay? And this happens in my life, and I'm going to tell you that I'm the worst model sometimes, and sometimes I'm the best because I look at it. But most of the time I'm not so good because I'm learning with my child that's now 6. Here's a tool called Adobe Spark. And this Adobe Spark is made maybe for older kids, but this is idea of designing something. So you can record videos, you can do book covers, you can just do anything related to covers, right? So you can look at our review. This is called Wildcrats Run. This is for many, many months. My child loved playing this game. It's a mapping game, and the kids go through this ecosystem, and she wants me to be a rat sometimes, and she wants me to be a monkey other times, but she's playing this game. She's always asking for this game. These are the two things, and now I'm going to show you how you can then amplify your child in this process, right? You can read the review on the site if you're interested in that. This is my little daughter. This is our apartment complex. She's 6 years old. This is her saying that I'm bored, or her saying that I want to be in the sun, right? This is maybe a day that happens in our apartment. And I'm doing the following. I'm thinking, I want you to think flexibly, meaning I want you to think about how you're applying your information to something else, and you're flexible in your design. Remember I said a second ago that she watches that Wildcrats race and it's about a map? What I did one day, and what we've been doing, and this can happen any day. This took me literally less than 5 minutes to create. I said, Amelie, will you do me a favor? This is my daughter's name. Will you do me a favor and draw your own map? And after you watch the show, I want you to do what map works for you, right? What is the map that would be in your life? So she said, well, eating, going to sleep, taking a shower, all these little signs represented something in her day. This is her daily map. And so I said, okay, interesting, right? So then we said at the very end, this end is, I want you to tell me the map, and I want you to tell me the story about how you go to sleep. And so she's learning letters. And so she decided that after watching Wildcrat, I often say, don't forget, we have to do your own map, and you have to tell me the story, because this is the part we're in your game. And so she showed me this story about, this is how I go to bed. Right? Really easy, basic thing, right? Interesting piece that she wrote on. And so now what I noticed is I got her hooked. And I know now that I can essentially take this document And this could be anything. This could be YouTube, Fortnite, name it. It's very irrelevant to me. And I've essentially said, so tell me now, can you make something about your cover? Because now we're making a story about that map. And this is her. This is how I goes to bed, right? So that she's learning this, right? This is an interesting piece. So she didn't want to write the bed now. She wanted to draw something. And this is what she did on Adobe Spark. Now you might be thinking, wow, your child is a graphic designer. No, she's not. She just likes to play and doodle and tinker and do all that. But do you notice what I just did, right? I went from playing a game to applying it to having her think flexibly or having her think critically about the content that she's writing, to then introducing a tech that would help to reinforce this. And I'm using tech all along, and I'm using sort of pen and paper all along. And what I'm sharing to you is not that it's good or bad. It's simply, this is a process that you can consider using to amplify your child's usage on tech. I'll close with this, just so you know, how do I do this? Always start with intros and outros. Miss Yolanda Romo, thank you so much. You've played for now an hour and a half. Before we get into the next game, here's what I'm going to ask you to do before you move on, right? We want to be intentional by scripting it for our families. This is something you can send out. At the end, this is what we're going to do. Now let's practice. The second thing is you're going to incorporate feedback. Remember the comadre story that I said about the interrupting along the way? You want to kind of incorporate that narrative in your conversations. Are you playing this? Can you let me know about this? What's going on? Hey, you look kind of funny. Why are you smiling? So on and so forth. We want to embed those questions and practice with our families. And now the third piece is the apply the executive skills, right? Now, can you draw that for me? Now, can you actually do this because you've seen this? Okay, I want you to pause now for a second. Now I want you to dance like they are dancing on that game. It doesn't matter what that thing is. We're developing those skills to transition away from them. All right, you all, I told you I'd talk your ear off. I went 1 minute over past the 10 minutes that I said. So I'm going to close by thanking you and also asking if there's any last questions before I let you be on your way and fill out a wonderful survey.
I have a question.
Of
So
course.
we talk about the kids and home, the normal kids, like I say, but how we can work with the kids with special education.
Great point. Okay, let me pull up that deck and then let's spend the next hour talking about that, because I don't give it justice for my response. I want to name that that's difficult. The first is we are building practice with our kids, right? Routines and practice. So if I can share anything with you, it is practice the routines with your kids and create a system of practice with your families, right? Hey, I really like that you have the device. Now let me have it back, right? This isn't rudimentary. This is foundational for our kids. And again, it depends where they're at within the spectrum, but we're building those habits that our kids are developing, right? Hey, I noticed that you're out of control now. Now let's give that back so we can actually develop that. So that would be the number one thing. Number two things is helping families come up with alternatives to technology use. So we're not just giving the device as a catch-all for families. And again, I don't want to make any assumptions, but we're actually practicing other things. The actual transitions is really, really helpful for that. So those are probably, I mean, there's a whole sessions that I do, that's Cuenca, that I will forward you of information and resources, but those two things would probably be key and critical. Teaching our kids the active use, that technology is that. And then the second thing is actively practicing those tools to kind of create that. The last thing I'll say is it's really helpful to look at our site or other sites, but look at tools that can help draw out social and emotional learning along the way. So, and again, I can forward this to you as others are asking. I can give you a whole session on it. So have families look at things that are actually going to benefit the child. Does this make sense? Like those would be the three things that I can help you out with. Great question. Yeah. And again, shoot me an email or I'll send you something, information around, or I'll send it to the group to kind of help to reinforce that. Great question.
Thank you so much.
All right. Anything else? Okay. You all ready for this? Like move on to your life and move on to your day and If you were drinking beer throughout this time, stop drinking so you can actually do your job. And if you're drinking water, drink some more. But I really just want to appreciate you all and validate you all for being on a call for an hour and 40 minutes. Thank you all. Thanks for folks that I've highlighted. If you need any help, any thought partners, or if you're doing something right, you just want to be highlighted for doing it right, please email me, email the county office, and we can kind of work through there.
That's great.
That's it,
Thank you
yeah.
so much,
Yeah.
Jamie. We really
you.
appreciate you. We're getting lots of thank yous and appreciations in the chat. So that's really, really great. Thank you, all of you, for being here today. If you know people that were not able to attend, we will be posting this training on our YouTube channel. Just Google First 5 Alameda County YouTube and you'll find it there. Probably it'll take us a few days to get it up there. And don't forget to do your evaluation. That's how we know if this is the kind of training you want, and tell us what you want more of. That's really helpful.